breaking news. At any minute, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will testify before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Oversight. Blanche is expected to be asked about the usual, the Justice Department's budget, but also the unusual, the $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund that he signed off on. And, of course, the story that keeps on going. He'll be asked about the Jeffrey Epstein files, likely. We're going to monitor Blanche's testimony. Also, this is a big election day in 6 states. You see the 6 states on the screen. Polls close in a few hours in the hotly contested races. We're going to have the latest on that in just a moment. And here is a brain teaser. Ready? Why does Google want to release millions of lab-grown mosquitoes into 2 different states? And is your state one of those 2? Find out in minutes. I'm Greta Van Susteren. This is The Record. Today is a huge primary day. Voters in California, Iowa, New Jersey, Montana, New Mexico, South Dakota are all headed to the polls. These primaries will determine nominees for House races, Senate races, races for governor and mayoral races before the general election, the midterms, in November. All polls will be closing in just a few hours. CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp and former Special Assistant President Biden and former Press Secretary to First Lady Joe Biden, Michael LaRosa joins me. Michael, first to California. What a race for governor there is there. You've got, first of all, Kamala Harris, the former vice president, said she wasn't running. Then you had Eric Swalwell, who everybody thought was going to run away with the race. Well, now he's running away from, I guess, lawsuits or a lawsuit, something. So who's going to be the next? Who's going to win?
I think in the end, Becerra and Tom Steyer will probably get the top 2 and move on, advance to the general.
And Tom Steyer is a billionaire. He ran for president. I interviewed him once in the Iowa caucus.
2 Democrats. I know there's a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation that a Republican could get into the runoff, but I think Becerra and Steyer both get in.
And that Republican would be Steve Hilton, former host, I guess, at Fox News.
Yeah, that's right. So, remind everybody that California Democrats decided to change their system to a jungle primary in the hopes that 2 Democrats would almost always be the 2 survivors or the top 2 vote getters to get into the general election. And then something strange happened. The voters of California said, we don't like the fact that when there's fires, there's no water in the hydrants. We don't like all the crime. We don't like all the homelessness. We don't like high taxes. And out of nowhere, Republicans are having a resurgence in L.A. and in California.
They still have to win. They may be having a resurgence, but they still have to get across the finish line.
I have to say, in California, it's nice to even be in the conversation to begin with. And it spooked Democrats who felt like this was a slam dunk thing. Michael brings up the 2 Democrats who were leading the polls as of today, getting to the general election. I think the other thing that benefits the Democrats is the way they vote in California is like the worst in all of America. You can vote early for any reason. I see pictures of ballot boxes where you can return your ballots without anybody checking voter ID or anything else. So it's really crazy and wrong the way they vote, which does not help the Republicans. But that being said, you could have a Republican in the runoff for governor and for mayor of L.A.
Do you, Michael, who do you think realistically is going to win that governorship in November?
I do think one of the 2.
I know, but pick one.
I'm not good at predicting.
I'm not saying endorse one. I'm saying pick who do you think is going to because they're very different. They're very different.
I think Steyer would be better for the state because I think it would be good to have a non-politician lead the state of California. I think that would be a good thing. So I'd be fine with Steyer or Becerra, but in the end, I would probably go for Steyer. I like his pragmatism. I like his focus on big ideas, on the largest housing build-out in the history of California. If anybody could do it, it'd be somebody like him who is ambitious, who's been able to grow a business, and I like that.
Matt, it's no surprise California has a lot of problems. One of them is homelessness. We've seen terrible pictures of the homelessness.
Epidemic.
Plattner's really going after Mayor Karen Bass in this race about homelessness. Mm-hmm. But what can you do? I mean, it's one thing to sit up to be the opponent to the opponent party.
Look, Spencer Pratt is running a hell of a race. His ads are, going viral. But what's happening quietly in California is the resurgence of kind of like a common sense kind of candidate. So in San Francisco, you had a lot of people elected to their governing council who were independent and not left-wing woke crazy people.
Same with the mayor.
Who
But
were
that's
saying,
still- but
enough
that's-
is enough of this.
But that still doesn't answer the question. Is what would Pratt do about homelessness? I mean, what is the answer? I mean, like, it's one thing to say Bass isn't doing anything. Look how bad it is. But what could he do?
Look, there's the first question, which is, don't feed their drug and alcohol addictions, actually get them help. What Donald Trump did in Washington, D.C. is the right thing to do. Don't just let them be all over the streets everywhere. Actually put them up someplace where if there's a chance they can have a functional life, they can get the help, right? I mean, God knows we spend enough on social services in this country. Why do people have to be sprayed out on our streets and the parks and the sidewalks?
I guess
Nice
I'm
to
more
hear
of
a
a
Republican talk about publicly subsidized housing.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well,
but
the subsidized housing is in the park, which is stupid.
I guess I'm sort of a pessimist, and I don't know how you feel about Michael. But I mean, the whole thing about the homelessness is because it's so nice and so easy to say get them treatment, but it's so difficult to get them treatment, so difficult to get success, and then what do you do with them after? And it costs a tremendous amount of taxpayer money. It really is, it's really a tough hill to climb.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I said I knew anything about how to solve those, like the public works crisis in California or the homeless crisis anywhere. But I think it is pretty consistent across the board, sadly, that Democratic mayors across the country have really failed these big cities. I think that is clear. I do like the fact that in San Francisco, they did elect
I'm right about
sort of
this.
a pro-business Democrat, Dan Laurie,
and I think an independent.
And he's very popular. He's doing good things. I have to be honest with you. I could vote for Spencer Pratt. I think sometimes.
Something to shake up the system. Something
I
to
think
break
sometimes
glass.
systems do need responsible disruption.
That's going to be part of Spencer Pratt's next ad for the general election. Michael LaRosa says he could vote for Spencer
I don't think
Pratt.
anybody in LA cares about Michael LaRosa.
Let me just say this very quickly. You talk about these cities, right? We're the only country that has the problems to this extent. And I think the people who love those cities, including people on the left, are saying, enough's enough. We should have some functionality. What Trump's doing in D.C. is right, which is if you love Washington, D.C., why shouldn't the fountains not be public toilets and actually work and look nice? Why shouldn't the parks be used by people who actually want to
It does feel safer in the city.
It is.
feels
Judge Janine
safer.
and these people have done a good job.
And by the way, it's not even, I don't want to give President Trump too much credit, but in 2023, the Department of Interior came to the Biden administration and said in the budget they wanted to spend a couple more $1 million on that same reflecting pool because the renovation in 2010 that Obama did for $13 million turned out to be completely mishandled. So we even asked to do more for the reflecting pool, our DOI. So it's funny to see Democrats really run commercials and hit Trump for wanting to clean up the reflecting pool.
Remember that Trump wanted to help L.A. and wanted to send, I think, the National Guard into L.A., and they said no.
Well, look, LA has a lot to think about in the future in terms of the resources that they need from the federal government, whether it's FIFA, whether it's Super Bowls, which they're hosting several of, whether it's
the World Cup, too.
The World Cup, but also the Olympics in 2028. And Trump is very invested in making sure that...
Well, if Bass wins, she's got to be receptive or it's not going to...
And they can't raise taxes any higher.
No, Matt Schlapp, Michael LaRosa, stand by, because I'm going to be checking in with you again later. Thank you both. Coming up, Senate Democrats are caught between a rock and a hard place. They're being asked about fellow Democrat and Senate candidate Graham Plattner. Is Plattner too controversial, and how do they defend him? That when the record continues.
You're dangerous.
A very interesting place to be right now. It's been 35 days, as you can see on the counter here behind me, since Nicolas Maduro, the leader of this country, was taken by Delta forces.
Because you're honest.
You don't get political. I don't think actors should.
Thank
you.
So break the glass.
And I guess this didn't sit too well with one of the Schmidt heads on Newsmax.
What the FCC is supposed to regulate, ABC breaks that law every single night. That is not a comedy show. That is propaganda.
Watch Rob Schmidt, weeknights.
I wish I loved my smile.
I wish I could get implants.
I wish money wasn't so tight.
I wish I can justify the cost.
I wish my insurance could save me more on dental implants.
See what it can do at ClearChoice. Show us your insurance card and save $5,000 on fixed full double arch implants. That's insurance assurance on a smile that's built for life. Schedule your free consultation today.
It's 2 a.m., your fever spiked, and you're miserable. Here's your options.
Urgent care, closed. ER, slammed. And you'll spend hundreds of thousands in both. Telehealth, yeah, but the pharmacies are closed.
That's the reason why we keep emergency medical kits at home.
It has doctor-prescribed medication like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other antibiotics and antivirals. You can treat flu, pneumonia, strep, sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
Because if you're sick in at night, traveling or stranded, you don't want options.
You want what is inside this kit. No waiting, no pharmacy, and no copays.
Just schedule a quick telehealth call.
And that's how you feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
Every family should have this kit, and here's how to order yours.
Order online in minutes and use the promo code to save $45. Your doctor-prescribed kit ships fast to your door, packed with medications to treat over 30 conditions. So when something hits, you're ready. And a wellness company telehealth doctor is always there if you need guidance.
When is controversial too controversial? I'm talking about Maine's Democratic Senate candidate, Graham Plattner. The troubling reports from his Nazi tattoo to now texting women sexually explicit messages while married are dominating his campaign. Not a really good start, is it? Well, it's not just his problem. Now other Democrats are being forced to answer if Plattner is right for the job.
That is what the election in Maine is going to partly be about, and he's going to have to withstand the scrutiny of the people of Maine. That's what our elections are all about.
What's your view?
I'm busy running for governor of Colorado.
Do you think he's fit? Do you worry about Graham Plattner? Are you okay with him because he's a Democrat?
Well, I'm going to wait to learn more about these recent allegations involving his texting other women. Ultimately, though, it's going to be up to Maine voters what they decide, how important or unimportant that is, and how important to focus on the economy, cost of living, and those issues are.
White House and Washington reporter for Politico, Daniel Lippman, joins me. Daniel, I mean...
Lots of dodging and weaving in those.
Oh, so Dutch. I mean, like, okay, Schiff says that he needs to learn more about him. Well, he's got homophobic posts. He says anti-women posts. He's got Nazi tattoos. He's saying he's sexting other women while he's married, and I guess the list could maybe go on.
All he had to do was read the New York Times and Wall Street Journal stories, and that's all you need to know. And what is he going to call Graham Plattner and say, hey, can you send me all the texts? I want to learn more about this.
I mean, they look. I mean, I guess they just look bad when they try to defend him.
Yeah, but I think a lot of Democrats these days nationally and in Maine, they kind of view him as the lesser of two evils, and so
they're calling Susan Collins evil.
Well, they're looking at, hey, if you want a Democratic Senate. This is a person who is ahead in the polls, almost 10 points.
Well, so they're not criticizing. I mean, Susan Collins. I mean, whether you're for her or against her, she's never done anything wrong, I don't think, in her life. I mean, she was the kind of kid that wouldn't let me cheat off her paper in high school. You know, I mean, she's pretty much straight arrow.
Yeah, no, she's one of the most moderate Republicans in the Senate. I think Democrats would want more people like Susan Collins. But of course, they need the majority to have subpoena power, and they need, if Trump is going to get another Supreme Court nominee in the next few years, they're thinking Graham Plattner, he would be a vote for us, and so it's kind of the same view of how Republicans viewed the Trump phenomenon, where they've had to answer, Republican senators have had to answer so many questions from Capitol Hill reporters about, oh, Trump said this, Trump did this, please respond.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that I think some of the responsibility for this candidate really lies with the DNC. I mean, if the DNC didn't court a better Democrat in Maine without this, because it's not too hard to dig up this stuff on him.
And what's funny is that Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, she's reminded Maine media that she's still on the ballot. So she's suspended campaigning, but if people actually want to vote for her, then there's a snowball's chance in hell that she would actually win against Plattner, but I don't think that's going to happen.
But they thought that in Alaska with Lisa Murkowski.
She had to write in.
Yeah, had to write in her name, and she surprised everybody.
But what I think that the Plattner theory of the case is that you want look at Spencer Pratt. You guys were talking about him in the last segment. where there is this hunger for authenticity. And this is someone who, even though he went to the same boarding school as I did for a few months, Hotchkiss in Connecticut, but he had a pretty kind of troubled life ever since, and he served in the military, so that he's talking about that. But he has that real economic message that this is not a full child of privilege. This is someone who's kind of had a hard scrabble life and doesn't actually make that much money.
Well, I don't know how diverse the population is in Maine, but probably the Jewish population and others should feel the same way as the Jewish don't like the Nazi thing. They don't like that. I suppose that the gay population is not wild about the homophobic slurs, and nobody should be happy with that. And the women's thing about women's sexual harassment, the thing he said about women, and I don't think the women are too wild about it. I mean, which is his subgroup? Oyster fishermen.
Yeah, no, well,
he hasn't insulted them.
I think he's just hoping that people's hatred of Trump in the Democratic Party in Maine will be enough that he will kind of skate through. And that I think that there's a lot of Democrats who are happy that this they're not happy about the scandal, but they're happy that this is happening in late May, early June, not in October when people are actually voting.
But Susan Collins is not exactly a MAGA Republican. I mean, she has bucked the system, and she's not always agreeing with President Trump.
She's not, but I think that Trump has driven out a lot of, it's funny he didn't actually try to primary. He knew that it would be hard to primary Susan Collins for not being, she's been more in opposition to Trump than John Cornyn, but that wasn't enough to
which is why I would think that the voters of Maine might prefer Susan Collins, although she's underwater in her approval rating. She doesn't have a high approval rating in Maine, but if you don't like Trump, you don't have to vote for a guy who has said really hostile things to various segments of the population. You can vote for a Republican senator who is moderate, who has taken on Trump herself.
Yeah, I think just people are viewing it as, hey, this is the late Trump era, that they were expecting Trump to focus on the economy and not to focus on weaponization funds and the Lincoln Memorial, fountains in Washington. They wanted him to lower the price of eggs and the cost of food and gas. And so anyone with a R on their name, especially in a state like Maine, which votes for Democrats for president, that it's like a scarlet letter these days. And so even if you're a Nobel Peace Prize winning Republican senator, that's not enough for many Democrats.
I suppose it helps that he has Bernie Sanders behind him, neighboring Vermont, because Vermont population in a lot of ways is sort of Maine-ish.
Yeah, I think it's this like upper, northern New England folks that a lot of these people are not reading every single article. They have daily lives. That Maine is a population that has struggled with the opioid epidemic a lot. That if they see 5 minutes of news, and so I think it's happening early enough in the campaign that he can revive himself. And this is someone who he's attracting hundreds of people to his campaign rallies. It's not like when Eric Swalwell and other members of the 2020 field that were very fringe members, they would get like 2 people at their campaign rallies.
We'll see what happens. Anyway, it's fascinating to watch what happens in Maine with that. Daniel Lippman of Politico, always nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta.
Earlier, Secretary of State Marco Rubio testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This was his first time appearing before the Senate since the start of the Iran war on February 28. While this hearing was billed as a State Department budget request, the questioning quickly turned to the Iran war.
Are you going to drive a bargain that is so tough and so hard that the Strait remains closed? So how are we going to get it open?
The first thing, that is a predicate to anything else happening. The Straits have to be reopened. So the way to think about it is this. If Iran wants to be able to move its oil again through the Strait, they will have to reopen the Straits.
All of us that have worked on this for years know how frustrating that is, how difficult it is to work with this regime who've sponsored terrorism, kidnapping, and killed thousands of Americans for the last 47 years. Thank you for doing something about it.
Now, we are in talks, and I say talks because talks with Iran are not like talks with Switzerland, okay? They're very different. They require the use of intermediaries, unfortunately. For the first time, certainly in my memory, they have agreed to negotiate aspects of their nuclear program that just a month ago, or just a year ago, they were refusing to even mention, much less enter into discussions about. Complicating that process, unfortunately, is their internal regime is somewhat fractured in the sense of it takes days to get responses from their system.
Meanwhile, an Axios report that cited anonymous sources, you know I hate anonymous sources, stated that President Trump lashed out at Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over what is happening in Lebanon. President Trump wrote on Truth Social in part, quote, "I had a very productive call with Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu of Israel, and there will be no troops going to Beirut," end quote. Yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu said in part, quote, "I spoke with President Trump and told him that if Hezbollah does not cease attacking our cities and citizens, Israel will attack terror targets in Beirut. The stance of ours remains unchanged. In parallel, the IDF will continue to operate as planned in southern Lebanon," end quote. Today, Israeli journalist Amit Siegel, who you have seen on this program several times, responded to the Axios report. He said, quote, "According to a very senior official on the Prime Minister's team on the late-night Netanyahu-Trump call, the Axios report is inaccurate. Trump did not make personal remarks about jail or claim Netanyahu is hated globally. Instead, the tense call focused on conflicting social media posts. Trump felt Netanyahu implied the war was continuing at full intensity, while Netanyahu felt Trump implied a total ceasefire," end quote. Coming up, an alleged drunken night out ends in a lawsuit, and the girlfriend of FBI Director Kash Patel is the one taking legal action. That when the record continues.
This is a bottlenose dolphin, and this is the breakthrough nutrient doctors discovered that helped some dolphins age healthier than others. It's called C15, and the more they had in their diet, the healthier they aged. Now, over 100 peer-reviewed studies later, Fatty 15 is bringing this discovery out of the ocean into everyday life to give your cells the same age-related benefits as all those happy, healthy dolphins. Fatty 15, healthy aging for all.
250 years ago, a nation was forged by grit, by courage, by freedom. Today, we raise a glass to that same spirit. 4547 Strait Bourbon Whiskey, the 250th Anniversary Edition. Bold, independent, unmistakably American. Toast to independence this year. Built by patriots, for patriots. Order yours today.
This is keratin debris, where nail fungus grows. Nonix Nail Gel cleans out fungus by removing keratin debris. Using Nonix, 90% of nails improve. Get clinically proven results. So effective, it's money-back guaranteed.
The perfect gifts. The Jewelry Exchange has diamond pendants $99, diamond clusters $249 per carat, 5-carat diamond tennis bracelets $8.99, 1-carat studs and solitaires $2.99. Great service, selection, and prices. Factory direct. The Jewelry Exchange.
For pain in multiple spots like here, here, or here, Salonpas patches stick firmly and remove comfortably once your pain is gone. Salonpas. It's good medicine.
My mom had her identity stolen, and seeing just how stressful that was changed everything for me. Now, I use the Experian app to check my FICO score and even get real-time alerts. It helps me feel in control. Get started with the Experian app.
As a kid, I was desperate for the $300 pairs of sunglasses that I saw all the athletes in my life wear. But it was just not realistic for me to spend that kind of money on sunglasses, something that I would probably lose or break. And that was the genesis for starting Shady Rays. High-quality, polarized, performance sunglasses with lost and broken protection. If you'd like to try a pair completely risk-free, see why millions have switched to Shady Rays at shadyrays.com and shop our full collection.
Sensitive mouth and gums? Ever heard of Closest mouthwash? Your dentist and hygienist have. They know Closest is ultra gentle for sensitive mouths with non-burning mouthwashes that freshen breath, improve gum health, and strengthen teeth. Closest, the gentle mouthwash for sensitive mouths.
Honey, Mortgage Bunny 6 says we should keep renting.
Mortgage Bunny 6?
Reba says more realtor agents recommend Realtor.com. They track every market so you know when to make your move.
He also says that Bigfoot... Got it.
Make it real with Realtor.com.
Kibble.
It's been the standard for decades, and it's failing our dogs. That's why we created Badlands Ranch Superfood Complete. It's gently air-dried, locking in the nutrients and the flavor dogs go wild for. Visit your local pet food retailer today.
The dinner has been rescheduled against what everyone sort of guessed in this town. The original White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday, April 26, has been rescheduled because before the dinner was even served that night, a gunman stormed into the outer area. Everyone inside was immediately told to hit the floor, and more than 2,000 guests quickly obliged with the bang, bang, bang. The Secret Service then immediately evacuated the president and vice president. Of course, the dinner was then quickly ended. Now we are learning the big dinner has been rebooked. It will happen on July 24th with, of course, extra security. It's not clear if President Trump will attend or not. Meanwhile, over at the White House, President Trump is not just having anybody fill in for Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt. She's on maternity leave and has had substitutes. Her substitutes at the podium in the White House briefing room have included Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and last week it was Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent. So who was the lucky person today? Dr. Mehmet Oz. He is the chief of Medicare and Medicaid. Here's what he said about the other fill-ins.
They're all obviously different. I think Scott Bessent's dry humor is fabulous. Marco is just an earnestly funny person. We can tell all kinds of stories about Marco's entertaining commentary. I think JD was spectacular. You know, he's just very on his game, understands the issues, and he understands the American people, which is I appreciated his presentation so much. And I did watch them all, by the way, just to prepare. I'm a doctor. I try to do my homework. I prep for the case.
Dr. Oz was asked many questions, including about President Trump's health.
If the president's in such perfect health, why does he keep coming back in for checkups?
I think he likes the results. He does really well. He aces the test every single day. And I do actually believe that he is curious to make sure everything is going in the right direction. He's a very meticulous person in so many ways that are often underappreciated. But for him to want to know all the numbers and keep on top of them, it's the same reason he calls people at odd hours, because something's on his mind and he wants to deal with it.
I want to bring back my panel, Matt Schlapp and Michael LaRosa. Matt, there's a chance you may lose a Senate seat in Ohio. Senator Joni Ernst, a Republican, she has an open seat. She's retiring, and it's a tough race, maybe. But Iowa is unpredictable.
Yeah, it's unpredictable, and they have this weird rule in Iowa where you have to hit the 35% threshold in a primary to avoid a convention. I don't really recall when that's happened, but it's a bit of esoterica. But you know, there are real questions with these Republicans in Iowa for the governor's race and in the Senate race. So it's a really interesting night. Randy Feenstra has gotten the nod in the governor's race by Trump, but he's got a hell of an opponent in Lawn, and we'll see what happens.
Michael, I mean, it really does. I mean, even though the main Democratic candidate's got some issues, to say it politely, if the Democrats take Maine and they take Iowa, it really could change things.
Absolutely, because
I mean, these are big nights.
I think that the consensus is that North Carolina is over, that the Democrat will win there.
So that's three. Then if they win, that could be a third.
I don't think that's over.
Ossoff will keep his seat in Georgia. Chris Pappas will succeed Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire, and then.
But those are maintenance. Those are
maintenance. But we still have to hold them. The questions are more around right now. I believe Iowa, Ohio, and Michigan.
All right, Michigan.
Yeah, I don't think. Look, I think this is what Democrats have an optimistic view, which is all of these challenges to their candidates, will fail, and we could lose these races.
We could definitely screw it up.
Susan Collins, I mean, give her credit. I mean, she has found a way to win in Maine over and over and over again.
She's underwater right now, though.
I wouldn't
That's
bet
the
it.
problem.
She's always
She's
underwater.
so lucky that she's got a bad candidate.
You know what,
She was underwater six years ago, continuously, up until election night, and she ended up winning pretty handily.
She won by 9 points.
That's a lot.
Biden won by 9 points. That state seems to like her and they don't really like chaos. It seems because they didn't want Trump, but they didn't.
Maybe they just punish her with approval ratings leading up to it. With bad approval ratings.
Well, she has it's hard for a Maine Republican to perfectly reflect the party in Washington, D.C., because not every aspect of that's popular. But she seems to find a way. Look, Iowa and Ohio, Republicans talk about, I'll throw Georgia in this mix, and I'll put North Carolina in this mix as well. I think the environment is actually good for Republicans. So, if things get better in the economy, if things get better on affordability, if they actually do get to a resolution in this war, I think those states are in a position where Republicans could actually do well. It's very important this cycle to not make predictions too early. These races are just really starting.
Well, you know what,
I agree with that.
You know what
I
I
agree
think?
with
You know what
that.
I think is going to have a big difference if it happens, is President Trump and the RNC, at least a couple months ago, talked about a midterm convention.
They're
and you
doing
get
it.
so much wind behind your sails. I've heard nothing about it since, but the Republicans
doing
put
it.
on a show like, when is it?
I don't have the date.
Where is it?
I know where it is, but
Is
I don't
it
know if
Dallas?
Well, it could be.
Okay, all right. Well, you're so good at
really
keeping a secret.
So watch tonight. Watch tonight will be a really big result in Iowa because it's between a progressive and a more mainstream Democrat in the Iowa primary, and that's gonna impact the general election in that debate in that race.
All right. The midterm is rapidly upon us. That's clear. But then, is no sooner the midterms over, but all of a sudden we're into the presidential race.
Yes,
We're in it already.
I think we're in it already.
We are?
But officially, I think you're right.
So tell me. So how soon would you expect people to announce?
Well, judging by their travel schedules right now, Governor Beshear, Governor Newsom, Rahm Emanuel are all already out there doing this sort of, Jackson Day dinners and Iowa dinners, New Hampshire. Even Joe Biden's going out to South Dakota tomorrow to do the McGovern dinner. So all these people are starting their
No southern France vacations. It's Iowa.
Doesn't look like it. I mean,
Right.
Good luck. It's fine. They'll have a blast. Iowa's a blast.
But you told me that Kamala Harris. When did she announce?
Yeah, Kamala
first
Harris
time
announced pretty early in 19. I believe it was February, and I believe Amy Klobuchar did as well.
Kamala Harris got out before she got in. She was out so fast. She ran a colossally terrible campaign, and then they gave her another shot at it. It's the craziest story in politics.
She got in early.
And her sister ran her campaign
We're
into
talking
the ground.
about the calendar right now,
All right,
Matt.
All right, Matt.
It was an
what's
easy
gonna happen?
shot.
Let me look ahead in the Republican president because it'll be upon us so soon.
Everyone says Marco or JD, right?
And you say neither.
No,
That's what
I'm
you
just
have
saying
said.
I think it's open. I think it's wide open. I think they're both very strong candidates, very impressive. I think Marco Rubio has been really smart, focusing on the job, the many jobs he has. JD Vance has, it's a tough position to be the vice president, right? Because you kind of get the bad without the good sometimes. But he's definitely the leading candidate, and he's a very strong candidate. But I think others are going to get involved.
How about someone like Bessent?
I think others. I agree.
He's the economy guy. I mean, he's the treasury guy.
This just doesn't. I don't think it works very well when you've had a successful president. Let's say for 8 years, right? I know it was separated by 4 years, but to then have the vice president grab the mantle and go, he's in a tough position, and it just means he might get it done because he's impressive. But the field is going to be big because everyone's be like, why does he get this mantle? Why can't I get this mantle? I've been involved in politics for 30 years. I have something to say. So I think Republicans in and outside of government are going to get in
here's
this
my
race.
wild card. I'm going to take the last word on Bessent, which I raised because if economy matters. He's a Secretary of Treasury. He's a successful businessman, and he's got somewhat of a following in he would be my wild card.
He is the star of the
I think
cabinet.
Ted Cruz is going to run. I think Ted Cruz is going to run.
I do too.
I would like to see Josh, or I would like to see Josh Hawley run.
Rick Scott could run.
Oh, Rick Scott's another one.
From Florida, I think you could see some other entrepreneurs,
There's a lot of hungry
businessmen.
Republicans out
Hey,
there.
how about Dr. Oz, who was at that
You're
podium?
not going to see me running, so you're lucky. You'll never see that. Anyway, Matt Schlapp and Michael LaRosa, thank you both. And the girlfriend of FBI Director Kash Patel is suing. Her name is Alexis Wilkins. She is suing Ms. Now, previously known as MSNBC, for defamation. Last year, the news outlet published a report she says defamed her, claimed that FBI Director Patel ordered an FBI security detail to escort one of Wilkins' friends home after a night of drinking. Wilkins, pleading in the lawsuit against Ms. Now, says the story is unfounded. Why? Well, the suit says the security detail for Kash Patel's girlfriend didn't even exist at the time. Now Wilkins does have a security detail. Meanwhile, Ms. Now is standing by its reporting. The report cited multiple anonymous sources. You know how I feel about anonymous sources. I hate them. But the lawsuit addressed these anonymous sources, writing, quote, Journalists cannot avoid accountability by hiding behind fabricated anonymous sources. This lawsuit seeks to bring accountability for defendants' egregious lies, end quote. So what is the lawsuit seeking? $75,000 in damages. Coming up, this arrest reminds me of Hamas and its sophisticated tunnels, but this is not Gaza. This is the United States. I'll show you when the record continues.
Hey, I'm Carl Higbee from Newsmax. Look, I'm unapologetically pro-American, and honestly, this is the one place that lets me call it how it is. I'm not holding back. I'll give it to you straight every single night.
People always ask me how I stay ready, how I stay consistent, how I lock in when it actually counts, again and again. It's the work you do before anyone's watching. They think I must be on something. Maybe. It's pure, it's potent. It's all me. Something that never lets me down. Armra. I'm on it.
Another lost summer scrolling and swiping? Turns out the fix is right here. Create new lifetime memories from the comfort of your backyard. No passports, no reservations. Latham's premium handcrafted pools can be installed in weeks. Our pools won't stain or crack and never require costly resurfacing. And with our crystal finish, you can bring your favorite exotic watercolor and shimmer right to your own backyard. Visit LathamPool.com now. Latham is a proud sponsor of USA Artistic Swimming.
My dad has never been in better shape. He had a stroke and passed away. He had a life insurance policy. Ethos.com. In 10 minutes, you can be covered with life insurance.
Check your price today at ethos.com.
Think you need a new roof? Think again and save thousands. We'll help you put off the high cost of a roof replacement for at least 5 years.
Or 10.
Or sometimes even 15.
We're America's most trusted roofer because we always try to save your roof rather than replace it.
We'll restore your roof for a fraction of the cost of a new one. But don't wait. If your roof loses too much protective coating, it's too late. Call now or scan the code and we'll give you an assessment of your roof for free.
For 250 years, America has depended on the courage of those who serve. They've defended our freedom and helped us become the nation we are today. At Wounded Warrior Project, we honor the past by building a better future for post-9/11 veterans, service members, and their families. They've given us their best. Join us in supporting them through the next 250 years of strength and resilience. Visit woundedwarriorproject.org/USA250.
What if you're sick at home or traveling and can't get medical help or prescriptions? Doctors say a medical emergency kit is the answer. Joining me is Dr. Drew.
Thank you. And yes, these kits put you in charge of your health. They come with physician-prescribed medication to treat multiple common and some serious issues as well.
What are some examples?
Sure. Generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, other essential antibiotics and antivirals that treat flu, pneumonia, strep, ear infections, sinus infections, urinary tract infections, and more.
So it is like urgent care and a pharmacy at home?
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications.
How do you know what medicines to take?
You just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Sound advice. Order online in minutes at the website below and save $45. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
An underground drug smuggling operation tunnel has been uncovered by both the United States and Mexican authorities. On Saturday, Mexican authorities discovered a nearly 2,000-foot-long tunnel near the U.S.-Mexico border. The Mexican authorities discovered the tunnel when they searched a property in Tijuana, Mexico. Tijuana, of course, is on the border with California. Yesterday, U.S. authorities confirmed this tunnel crossed into the United States and into a fake retail store in San Diego. This tunnel, just like the Hamas and Hezbollah tunnels, is equipped with lights, ventilation, and electric transportation system. 4 people, including 2 Mexican nationals, have been arrested. They are charged with conspiring to distribute more than $45 million worth of cocaine, using this unauthorized tunnel, and importing a controlled substance. Also happening this hour, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is testifying before the House. The focus of this hearing, the Justice Department's budget. But lawmakers are zeroing in on questions about Trump's nearly $1.8 billion weaponization fund, which could give payments to allies of President Trump. Another topic on lawmakers' mind, the Epstein files. Former federal prosecutor and former attorney for President Trump, Jim Trusty, joins me. Nice to see you, Jim.
You too.
And President Trump has said that he accepts a federal judge's decision, at least for the short time, that the fund won't exist.
Yeah, it seems like we're seeing a retreat. I mean, it was always a very difficult issue to say that you're not suing yourself. You're the president, you're suing the executive branch. Federal jurisdiction relies on this case and controversy notion, which basically means we don't have jurisdiction over you fighting against yourself. And they were asking, the judge was asking for briefing on that 2 days after the settlement was struck. So it was looming large. I think the problem is it looms large now, even for the settlement.
Well, it's sort of a tricky situation because the IRS released information. A whistleblower, some employee of the IRS released Don Jr., Eric, President Trump, and the Trump Organization files. Now, that guy has pled guilty, but nonetheless, the IRS, we're supposed to keep it secure. So Trump then sues the IRS for a terrific amount of money, and then it is settled in May. But the person he settles it with, the IRS comes under the president, of course. The person who signs off on it is the acting Attorney General of the United States, Todd Blanche. And so how they came up with that $1.2 billion or whatever the amount is that who came up with that? Was that what? Blanche, Trump, the IRS? I mean, who came up with that? Because that's a terrific amount of money for having your tax returns exposed.
Yeah, well, 1776 is the exact number, which I don't think is a coincidence, right? I mean, it feels like it's part of the 250 gala that we're going to have a settlement for, 17.76 billion, whatever the number is. But look, it's a lot that needs to be unpacked. We never saw the settlement agreement. We never saw how they got to certain things like freeing the Trump family from any audits.
That was another aspect of it. Anything up until the settlement that they couldn't be audited on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was creative, and I will accept that there are super funds, right? We have situations where we set aside giant pots of money, maybe not so poetic as 1776, but giant pots of money for people that were all harmed. And I will tell you, Greta, I don't want to see it as a political slush fund, but there were people that I met at Mar-a-Lago whose lives were turned upside down
without a doubt,
by these prosecutors. So when you're talking about like a maid, a landscaper, these folks are told, go to Washington to grand jury on Friday. I don't have a problem with them getting something out of
There
this.
were a lot of people like that. But the problem is that, probably the better way to do that would have a jury determine the damages. That probably would have been better, rather than Trump however this was negotiated with his acting attorney general, or that it should wait till he's out of office. But to sort of settle it with yourself, because that's the problem I have.
Yeah, waiting until he's out of office could have worked, because at that point, he's like any other plaintiff. He can set aside the winnings however he wants to at that point. And then you really avoid all of these, these hiccups that are getting aired out in
I don't mind
Congress.
I don't mind that he wants to, if he gets a settlement, how he wants to spend it.
Right.
That doesn't bother me at all. The thing that bothers me is that he's basically settled with himself, because that's the problem. And that, and by settling it with yourself, you determine the amount.
Yeah, the judges aren't letting it go. It's one thing to say, we've got this case that you filed suit on. I want briefing on jurisdiction. I want to know how it's not self-dealing. They settled 2 days before that, but now you're starting to hear judges go, I still have the same issue. I want to know how this settlement comes to be. I think that's the pressure, that the judges haven't let go of something that smells difficult, smells wrong. And so with that tension, I think that's why we're walking away.
You know what they could have done? The government could have confessed liability because his tax returns were released and that was wrong. But they could have brought a jury in to determine damages amount. Right.
Yeah, and you know what? And if that ends up being in D.C., I mean, I suppose the president would try to venue it in Florida.
I think it was South Florida. Wasn't it? It was South Florida.
Well, there's a few cases scattered around, but South Florida, he's got a chance of getting some sort of super fund out of it. D.C., they would probably, not even pay for his parking. I think if a South Florida jury would give him a chance of having a big pot to share with people.
But I mean, it was terrible that his returns and his kids' returns were released. I mean, everyone sort of thinks, oh, it's just, a lot of people don't like Trump, say that's tough. But, that was wrong. I mean, the IRS should not be used abusively towards anybody.
Absolutely. Look, I have a particular sweet spot against leakers. Anybody that's leaking, defense secrets, war plans, things of that nature, and all the way down to tax returns for a political candidate. I mean, that's a very self-righteous, obnoxious moment.
I don't like anonymous sources. Everybody knows, because you can't question them to find out where they did it, what's their motive, how they really know. So I have a real problem with the overuse of anonymous sources. Jim Trusty, thank you.
Sure, good to see you.
On Friday, North Carolina, doorbell camera captured an arrest turned violent. The video shows now former Shelby police officer Carson Hyder repeatedly punching a woman in her face during an arrest. The video sparked community outrage and protests. Over the weekend, Hyder was fired. Yesterday, Hyder was charged with 1 count of assault and turned himself in. He was later released on a $10,000 bond. Today, the former police officer made his first court appearance. He told the judge he has a lawyer. Hyder's expected to be back in court next month. By the way, I don't like to single out police officers in a report who may have behaved badly, even criminally. It may give you the false impression that all cops are bad. That's simply not true. This guy may be, we'll see what a jury says, but I'm going to show you the wide range of police work. They do incredibly good things, so stick around. Coming up, why would Google take on mosquitoes? That answer when the record continues.
Have you ever thought of getting a walk-in tub for you or someone you love? Now is a great time to take a look at getting a Safe Step walk-in tub.
With Safe Step's standard heated seat and new fast fill faucet, you can enjoy a nice warm bath up to 20% faster. And the convenient touchpad control is right at your fingertips.
Each tub comes standard with a dual hydrotherapy system. The 10 water jets can help increase mobility, relieve pain, boost energy, and improve sleep, while the MicroSoothe advanced air therapy system oxygenates and softens skin.
Safe Step walk-in tubs are built to maximize safety so you can stay in your home and enjoy the comforts of bathing again.
So call now for more information and a free no-obligation consultation.
When you call today, you'll also receive our limited time offer. Don't wait to enjoy safer bathing. Call 1-800-296-0431.
Your plumbing leaks, your AC goes out, your washing machine breaks down. When it happens, don't panic. One call and we handle it all. Surround your home's major systems and appliances with peace of mind. With Choice Home Warranty, you can finally have peace of mind and protection for costly repairs and replacements.
It eliminates anxiety, frustration, and it saves you money. I recommend using Choice Home Warranty.
Choice Home Warranty covers the repair and replacement of over 25 key systems and appliances. If one breaks down, it won't break the bank getting it repaired or replaced.
Things will break down, so that's why you definitely need Choice Home Warranty service to give you the peace of mind of knowing that they will solve your issue.
Every system and appliance will need repair at some point. With over 100,000 five-star customer reviews raving about our service, Choice Home Warranty is always ready when you need us.
We've been with Choice Home Warranty for over 7 years because it's been easy, it's been affordable, and they take care of everything that we need.
Call right now to get your special phone deal. Plus, ask how you can get your first month free. There's no home inspection, no commitment, and you can cancel anytime. Join more than 2.4 million homes nationwide who have protected their home with Choice. And Choice has a huge nationwide network of trusted technicians. Surround your home systems and appliances and yourself with the award-winning company that's been named the best home warranty company and best claim service. They are available 24/7, and every Choice Home Warranty plan covers repairs and replacements.
When the appliance breaks down, you need the security of a home warranty, and for me, it's Choice Home Warranty.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and learn about special phone pricing only available today. Plus, ask how you can get your first month free.
Call 800-211-0878. That's 800-211-0878. Call now.
As noted, today is a big primary day in 6 states, including California. The state is holding primaries for various state and local elections. One of the big races that the nation is watching is the race for mayor of Los Angeles. Top two candidates who get the most votes will move on and face each other in November's general election. So who are the candidates that are getting all the attention? Former reality TV star Spencer Pratt and the city's current mayor, Karen Bass. Polls will close 8 p.m. local time. Senior correspondent John Huddy is in Los Angeles with the latest. John?
Yeah, and Greta, really the question is whether Pratt will go on to the runoff election in November, or as he said, whether it'll be a tsunami and he'll get more than 50% of the vote and become the city's new mayor. That remains to be seen. But behind me is one of the voting locations here in downtown LA. Greta, we're just around the corner from City Hall. If you go down Broadway here, you go to the right, City Hall is just on the other side of basically the buildings here. And then if you continue in that direction to the right of the camera, about 5 minutes, then you get to Skid Row, where we spent basically the entire day yesterday interviewing people, talking to people, as you heard on the show yesterday as well, and seeing the homeless problem, the drug problem firsthand for ourselves. And that's really why Spencer Pratt's campaign has gained so much traction, is really, honing in and focusing on one, homelessness throughout the city of LA, not only in downtown, which has always been an issue, but how it has spread and gotten progressively worse over the last few years all over the city. Also, the drug addiction issue, violent crime, and then of course people's still raw feelings about the Palisades fire. He's also been very effective using social media and AI generated videos. And speaking of social media, once again he made his pitch to voters yesterday with a post on X, taking aim again at incumbent Mayor Karen Bass and also Nithya Raman, who is a LA City Councilwoman. Basically, they're the top three contenders. Here's in part what Pratt said in that message. Listen.
About right now, you've accepted the reality that she's not going to advance past the runoff. At this point, voting for Nithya is a wasted vote. It's me versus Karen. It's change versus more of the same. More homeless drug addicts in front of your schools, more animals being tortured and killed on the streets and in her city shelters, more empty reservoirs when the wildfires hit, more potholes, more of your favorite restaurants going out of business, no new housing getting built.
Now, Greta, I've been talking to Angelenos all day here at the voting precinct. A lot of people don't want to go on camera, but I was talking to a couple people a little bit earlier who said another issue, and this is something Pratt's talked about, is affordability, affordable housing, and just rents going too high. The other issue he's also talked about is keeping production, film production here in the city of Los Angeles. A lot of companies have left the state because of a lack of tax credits. Speaking of which, right next to this voting location is what's called the $1 Million Theater, and they're actually shooting inside the show, morning show, which is, of course, on Apple TV about a morning newscast. So, in very LA style, here in downtown LA. Greta, back to you.
John Huddy, thank you. And Google is getting into the bug business. We're not talking about computer bugs, but real bugs. Google is seeking to eliminate bad mosquitoes by releasing 32 million good mosquitoes. Google calls it the debug program, of course. The program is composed of scientists and engineers who aim to, quote, stop bad bugs with good bugs. So what makes these bugs good? Well, the good bugs don't bite, they don't carry disease, and they are sterile male mosquitoes. That means if they mate with female mosquitoes, the eggs will not hatch. According to the CDC, mosquitoes are the deadliest insects on the planet. Each year, up to 1 million people die from mosquito-borne diseases. Those diseases include, but aren't limited to, malaria, West Nile virus, Zika, yellow fever, Japanese encephalitis, and dengue fever. Now, Google has applied for a permit to release millions of these biologically modified mosquitoes. The two states Google is targeting are California and Florida. Coming up, please never know what to expect when they begin a shift. I'll show you when the record continues.
Closed captioning by America Tax Group. Stop IRS and state collections. Free consultation. Call now.
America Tax Group is the nation's leading tax firm that has helped millions of taxpayers resolve penalties, remove liens, and stop wage garnishments. If you're dealing with IRS or state tax issues, don't wait. Call now.
Hey, I'm Dr. Drupinski. I've been a physician for 4 decades. I've been looking at the aging process for a long time, and Fatty 15 is one product that actually slows it down. Fatty 15 comes out of Navy dolphin research. A brilliant veterinarian realized that dolphins get disease much like humans. She looked at what predisposed to those problems, isolated the molecule, gave it to the animals, they didn't get the problem. Without the C15, our cells become fragile and age and oxidize. This pushes that back. Cell health equals physical health. That's why I take Fatty 15.
People always ask, why Patriot Gold Group? With over 10,000 clients to date and over $1 billion in transactions, not a single complaint on the Better Business Bureau. Consumer Affairs top rated for 9 years in a row. Over 2,000 5-star reviews. the only company nationwide where you, the client, work directly with an owner. Home of the no fee for life IRA. Gold is up 80% in the last 28 months, 275% since Lehman Brothers collapsed. We are patriots protecting patriots. Give Patriot Gold Group a call at 888-528-4290 before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold and silver dealer 9 years in a row. Call now, 888-528-4290.
Doctors say having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care and pharmacy at home. Let me bring in Dr. McCullough to explain more.
Most people know when they're getting sick, but waiting to see a doctor is often too late.
So the key is having medicines before you need them.
Yes, and it includes doctor-prescribed medicines to treat common and serious issues like generic Z-Pak, amoxicillin, antibiotics, antivirals for flu, pneumonia, strep, ear and sinus infections, UTIs, and more.
So it is like having an urgent care at home.
Exactly. No waiting, no pharmacy, no copays. You feel better faster and avoid serious complications and hospitalizations.
How do you know what to take?
Just match your symptoms to the doctor-written guide or schedule a quick telehealth call.
Great advice. I understand ordering is fast online, and we've put the website and $45 off code on the screen. Thank you, doctor.
Visit urgentcarekit.com/news, promo code news.
My one word is actionable, which is not something you usually see from a financial product. It usually just is what it is, but we can actually make informed decisions. So actionable is my one word for Relay.
Every day, bumps and bangs happen. Bruises are optional. Use daily dermatologist-recommended Dermend and reduce the appearance of bruises. Get Dermend Moisturizing Bruise Cream in the first aid aisle.
My earwax buildup was frustrating. Then I tried new Lipo Earwax Cleanser. The revolutionary formula dissolves earwax 5 times faster than the leading brand and helps prevent future buildup. Feel the difference with new Lipo Earwax Cleanser.
Millions of Americans rely on a statin to reduce cholesterol, but statins can deplete CoQ10 levels. I recommend Cunol CoQ10 with 3 times better absorption and the #1 cardiologist recommended form. It helps replenish what statins deplete. Cunol, the brand I trust.
Police officers are incredible, risking their lives every day doing work big and small. Yesterday, we showed you these heroic police officers. They rescued humans and a dog from a burning home in Massachusetts. Today, we have another story of police coming to the rescue. This time, it's the New York City police. Officers noticed a mother duck walking circles around a storm drain. When they investigated, they saw her ducklings were dangerously caught in the drain. So the NYPD jumped into action and pulled 11 ducklings to safety. They were reunited with their mama duck, and then the happy family continued on its way. All thanks to the NYPD. And don't forget my new podcast called Greta Wire. Today's episode features Tito Ortiz. He is the former UFC light heavyweight champion. I talked to him about the upcoming UFC match at the White House. You can subscribe to Greta Wire free on your favorite podcast apps such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at newsmax.com/listen. Thank you for watching. Ed Henry, The Big Take is next. Stay with Newsmax.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.